Let's return to the Middle East, where officials in President Trump's government say the US will recognise Jerusalem as Israel's official capital later today. While the decision has been welcomed by Israel, Palestinian and Arab leaders have warned it would jeopardise any Middle East peace process. Well, in the past few minutes, Jordan's King Abdullah has said that Jerusalem is the key to the stability of the entire Middle East, while Turkey's President Erdogan has warned that moving the Israeli capital there would play into the hands of terror groups. Well, joining me from our central London studio to discuss this is Ben Jamal, Director of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and James Sorene, Chief Executive of BICOM, a British think tank on Israel and the Middle East. Gentlemen, thanks for your time this afternoon. Ben, if I could firstly start with you. Is President Trump jeopardising the Middle East peace process with this announcement that he'll make later today?
Well, yes, he is. I think The Guardian this morning has described his decision as diplomatic arson. I think Emily Thornberry, Shadow Foreign Secretary, has described it as breathtakingly reckless. They're both right, and I think the first important thing to note that it is an act, a decision that shows complete disregard for international law. The UN has made it clear through numerous resolutions that it does not recognise Israel's claim to Jerusalem as its undivided capital, and that no state should also recognise Jerusalem as the undivided capital of Israel, nor move its embassy there. So it's an extremely dangerous move.
James, a couple of lines coming in to us. Jordan's King Abdullah saying that Jerusalem is a key to stability in the Middle East region. President Erdogan, as I was saying in my introduction, is saying that this will play into the hands of terror groups. The warning is stark and clear.
Well, I think, first of all, the last few years have shown us that the stability of the Middle East hangs in other areas and other countries. So I think we shouldn't be overplaying this. But no doubt Jerusalem is absolutely central to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's also central in the Muslim faith and the Jewish faith and obviously the Christian faith. I think we need to be clear about a couple of things. First of all, President Trump said all along that he was going to recognise Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. He said this on the campaign. He also said it was his aspiration to move the embassy there. I think what's really important is what he actually says in his speech. Which Jerusalem is he going to recognise? Is he going to talk about the unified capital, the Jerusalem municipality, which brings in west and east and the old city with the holy sites? Is he going to talk about the west of the city, which is predominantly Jewish Israeli, which is where all of the Israeli government institutions are, and which, by the way, where British politicians and prime ministers have spoken in the Israeli parliament, where our diplomats meet Israeli politicians as well, and there is a kind of de facto recognition that that is the Israeli capital. And in none of the peace negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians have the Palestinians seriously questioned Israeli control and Israeli sovereignty over the west of the city. So the real question is, what is Trump going to say about the east of the city? And more importantly, if this is a big bargaining chip in the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations, then if he's giving Israel this potential prize today by saying, I recognise Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, what has he said he's going to give the Palestinians? What has he got from the Israelis in return? Are they going to return to the negotiating table? Is there some kind of deal there about land swaps in the future? But crucially, what is he going to say about a Palestinian state? Will he couple that with a recognition that the two-state solution is the only game in town?
So, Ben, the devil is in the detail of what President Trump is about to say.
Well, look, I think certain things are very clear, aren't they? I mean, there is an international consensus, first of all, that issues such as the status of Jerusalem need to be negotiated with both parties. There's an international consensus, regardless of how it's actually been played out in reality, that those who seek to be peace brokers should be even-handed. What's absolutely transparently clear is that whatever President Trump is going to announce today, he has not done that with the consent of the Palestinian people and the Palestinian leadership. But if we look at what it is likely that he's going to say, look, what he said in his election campaign, what we are seeing reported is that he is going to acknowledge and support Israel's claim to Jerusalem as its undivided capital. As I said, that is a complete violation of international law. It is a complete violation and disregard of the rights and legitimate claims of the Palestinian people. And if, bizarrely, Donald Trump is going to say, I declare my support for the idea of Jerusalem as the undivided capital of Israel, while simultaneously saying that he supports a two-state solution, that makes sense only in some sort of Trumpian world where we disregard facts. The reality is there can be no Palestinian state that does not have Jerusalem, does not have East Jerusalem as its capital.
James, one of the latest lines on this topic is that the Arab League is to hold an emergency meeting on this issue on Saturday. That has been called at the request of the Palestinians. So if President Trump has spoken to Palestinian officials, he clearly hasn't been listening.
Well, we don't know what he's actually promised them behind the scenes. I think that what we know from how Jerusalem always plays out over the last few decades, it is an incendiary issue, but it's also an incendiary issue because people want to light it up. And I think what we are seeing from some of the Arab leaders and from some of the Palestinian groups is they are jumping on this bandwagon. And they are, the Palestinian leadership declared 3 days of rage. And we've seen even in the summer that things can very quickly get out of control. So we have to be very careful about that, and I think a lot of the leadership in the region should show a little bit more responsibility by jumping on this bandwagon so quickly. We don't know what Trump is going to say. We don't know what he's going to, what concession he's going to give to the Palestinians. He might say something that is surprising. So I think we should do a little bit of a wait and see. But I think also, regardless, if he does recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, that should not necessarily be seen as an excuse for violence on a large scale. That is completely irresponsible, and there is a way to have peaceful demonstrations against these kind of political statements. That's very, very important. We shouldn't take that point for granted.
Ben, if he does make this announcement today, I mean, effectively nothing will really change. This is more a symbolic gesture than anything else.
Well, you're right in the sense that it's not going to change the facts on the ground, and Israel has been trying to exert de facto control illegally over East Jerusalem, illegally expand its settlement growth in East Jerusalem, try to annex the settlements in the West Bank and add them to the municipality of Jerusalem, all in violation of international law. So it's not going to change that. What it would do, of course, is give some sort of diplomatic support to what Israel is doing, and therefore give entirely the wrong message. And really, I think the important question for us today is what is the response of the UK government? And we need to see an absolutely robust, very clear condemnation of what President Trump is doing. We've heard Theresa May say in the past week or so that the UK government is prepared to speak truth to US power, is prepared to stand up to the US when it is doing something wrong. If Trump does today what we think he is going to do, what reports are telling us he's going to do, we need a clear statement that the UK does not support the violation of international law, still holds to the position of support for international law, and recognises the rights of the Palestinian people.
James, the Prime Minister, in a Prime Minister's Questions a short while ago, said that the UK remains committed to a two-state solution. Does all of this help or hinder that bid for that two-state solution?
Well, I think we need to see what Trump says. The substance of what Trump is saying within the context of peace talks where actually concessions are being traded, there's nothing inherently substantively wrong with that. I think the question here is about the timing, like why now? Is Trump doing this because of a domestic timetable, just because he has to sign this waiver or not sign it? Or does he actually believe that making this statement now will make a real difference within the talks that Kushner and Greenblatt are having in the region? So I think we don't know that bigger picture. The UK government position is that there should be a negotiated two-state solution between the parties. And again, going back to what I said at the beginning, the fact that Jerusalem is Israel's capital within that two-state solution is uncontroversial. Like all the negotiations between the parties and the nearest they got in 2000 and 2008 was always in a scenario where a part of Jerusalem, probably the west of Jerusalem, would be Israel's capital, the east of the city would be a Palestinian capital, and there would be some kind of shared status for the old city. None of that is particularly controversial, and we might find today that Trump's language is sufficiently woolly that all of that is still possible. So it's a lot about the timing, and it's a lot about how people on the ground react.
OK, let's see what he says. Ben Jamal, James Sorene, gentlemen, thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.